3 weeks of qualifying matches has brought us now to the crux of yet another of our monthly tournaments. This is the finals of our Overwatch League Countdown Cup. I am Mitch Leslie, joined by Matthew Morello. Welcome back to the Overwatch League, ladies and gentlemen. Today's games are stacked and nutty, and you don't want to miss any of them as our semi-finals kick off.
I believe this is the best two semis that we've had all year in NA. I mean, we kicked things off with the Shock against the Florida Mayhem, and then the Paris Eternal against the Philly Fusion. I think these are clearly the four best teams in North America right now, and probably throughout the entire season. So to see them square off here in the semis, well, we're going to get a nude final, right?
Yes, we have rematches of our May Melee and our Summer Showdown respectively. And of course, these teams are playing not only for a fancy little prize money bonus, but also 3 wins added to their season record, which for many teams, that's 3 weeks of games.
It's massive.
3 weeks of wins. It makes a huge difference, especially now as we're in the run-up to our playoffs. Following this cup, we'll have a lot of catch-up matches, but a lot of these teams have played much of their games for this season, and we're getting close to a decided sort of playoff race. That is going to be exciting. But for now, I would agree with you, Mal. We probably have some of the best games of the year so far coming right up as all 4 of our teams today, but specifically now, Florida and San Francisco, have honed their team compositions, their skills to a fine edge, and they're ready for a rematch after having played not so long ago.
Yeah, and when Florida played San Francisco in the earlier tournament, the May Melee, it was really Florida Mayhem's run up until that point. Being able to run the Tracer with the Ashe in a lot of different combinations. It was really Yaki going crazy that ends up getting them there. Because going into that, we all thought it would be Philly versus the San Francisco Shock. But Florida able to take out the Philadelphia Fusion, not able to take out San Francisco, though, in the finals. And I believe they played a few times after that. It has not gone the Mayhem's way in either of those.
Yeah, more recently, it definitely felt like the Florida Mayhem were playing second fiddle to the Shock. And honestly, it was a lot of the compositions that featured Genji and Tracer that San Francisco looked a little bit stronger in. Bear in mind, though, the last time these two teams played was back in hero pools where, heroes like Orisa were not available for selection. Now those restrictions have been lifted, and here is your Florida Mayhem starting roster. It will be the huge with BKB and Yaki in, and Chris will start for map number 1.
Yeah, they usually have Chris in for some of the control game modes because you want his Lucio in play. So you'll see Chris here. You most likely will see Byram everywhere else in the series, barring maybe they want to run Lucio on King's Row, but we saw them run Byram yesterday on King's Row. San Francisco, you take a look at their starting lineup. Nothing surprising here. Ansem Striker in terms of the damage dealers is probably the only conversation you can really have with the Shock at this point. We see Moth in different spots, but not as much. Really Violet and Twilight holding down the supports. Ans, you have him here for Busan, potentially Widowmaker play, lots of Ashe, McCree, and then Striker on the Tracer.
I mean, Violet had an unbelievable performance recently at Flex support, especially on Batiste there as well. He has to be considered one of the top Flex support players in the world, and San Francisco obviously have many of those front-runner players. I love the Sigma matchup in this series, man. Gargoyle versus Choikobin. 2 of the top performing Sigma. Gargoyle is top 3 in a bunch of combat stats.
Choi can sing as well. If you've seen any of the karaoke stuff that the Shock, they've kind of teased it a few times. I've seen Choi sing a bit, so I haven't seen Gargoyle sing, so I don't know what I would say about Gargoyle's singing capabilities.
So why then does Troy keep asking what that melody is, Matt? That's my question. If he can sing, I don't know why there would be any confusion about that for him whatsoever. Busan is going to be our first map of this series, and this is where we kick off, and there's opportunity for Hitscanner, especially for Ants to play Widowmaker. Ashe is probably a slightly safer approach here, but Florida shouldn't expect to have to deal with Genji Tracer, at least on these maps.
And I don't think the Shock should expect a Genji Tracer type of setup from the Florida Mayhem as well. The Florida Mayhem, when they've gone to some of a dive, they've played a lot of the Sombra Genji, different variations. So maybe we see that come into play for the Florida Mayhem. you would play the Winston with a Zarya in that type of composition. Looks like at the start, though, he'll have BQB just send everybody out with a TP. He'll go to Ashe. Ons will do the same, and we'll have a mirror matchup on both sides.
Here we go. The first semi-final of our Countdown Cup starts now, and on Busan, both teams playing the Tracer with the Widowmaker combined. So it will be mirror compositions. Arntt's very tight angle as he looks over towards that left-hand side, but Yaki's already gotten into the back line and found Violet. Good opening here for the Florida Mayhem, while Arntt is discorded, forced to go for a mega health pack on his own.
And typically, like, you need to see Yaki as a Tracer, maybe go after the Widowmaker first. With all these shields in play, it's not a bad decision for them to really kind of put the emphasis and pressure onto Violet, because Violet puts so much extra damage down for the shock. You get him out of the way, you don't allow him to build towards like 2-3 Transcendences that he's able to get some of these control points. You can start to make some progress.
Both Tracer players have found success in trying to get rid of backliners. BQB there, briefly being eliminated by Striker, but the Mayhem control the point after finding the first pick in the first fight. And again, with 2 shields in play, BQB and Answer are going to have to try and find some rather obscure angles to play from. This is a relatively safe position for BQB as he's just trying to get info right now. Yaki being kept away from the back line of the shot.
Just being a pest. Just being a pest. Constantly just kind of showing his presence, making it known. You see Ons, he knows he can't just turn at any time. Yaki, the Pulse Bomb, gets a few players low. That'll be the Immortality field out from Twilight.
I mean, the Kinetic Grass came at such a good time from Choikobi, but the shock below after 3 players getting hit with a Pulse Bomb, but he's able to stave off a lot of the damage and still allow the shock to use the Ant Matrix. Striker goes for a bomb of his own and takes Fate very low. This is going to tax the healing resources of the Mayhem a little bit too much this late in the fight. Twilight's able to find a quick double kill, and you can see the further away that Chris is from Fate, the longer it takes to heal him because of the travel time of those healing grenades.
Yeah, 3 kills from Twilight in that fight after he had Violet drop. So it's huge play from Twilight because the Florida Mayhem with that Ant Matrix, if you keep Fate alive long enough, and you also had him using Fortify trying to reduce some of that damage, now you have some players coming back off the respawn. You could have seen this extend into like the 80%.
62-24, San Francisco get themselves back in control, and as usual, Yaki looking for an opportunity, but Arntt's able to open up onto him, and now he's got a lot more room to work with. Striker actually doesn't have to go as aggressive now, knowing there's no Tracer to keep tabs on for the time being. Yaki's using his 2 legs and a heartbeat to return to the fray. And here comes Infrasight from Arntt. BQB doesn't have anything to answer with, but Twilight goes down early.
Yeah, you lose Twilight here to Gangnam Jin. A headshot. It looked like maybe that Smurf shield broke and Twilight wasn't expecting it, and just the volley of orbs came through at the right time. They'll lose both supports here as Twilight comes off of the spawn, working his way back into the fight now.
Yeah, now San Francisco try and transition into stall as much as they can. BQB getting hit with an accretion, but there wasn't any follow-up from Striker. He couldn't find the finish on the kill. He'll have to back away as well. The longer San Francisco can keep this point under their control, though, the more time they'll have to recover from this and at least get some switches in now. Arntt switches over to the Sombra.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're looking at the percentage in terms of the point for the Florida Mayhem. They'll pass the San Francisco Shock here. And what, the Shock have 2 fights left? You know that BQB is going to have walls. You wouldn't have had it for Arntt, so maybe you have enough time to get a EMP. But I think it's almost more for the hacks, right? You know that they have 6 ultimates available as well.
Arntt is going to have to build up that EMP awfully quickly. Here's a Transcendence, though, from Gangnam Jin that may have been forced out a little bit earlier on, as well as an Amplification Matrix, so no support ultimates up now for the Mayhem. But Twilight's already gone down. BQB has a pretty viable angle there as he tried to line Violet up, now turns his attention towards the Gravitic Flux. He's not needed, though, as Yaki is there to catch the shock as they drop down. Striker finds a Pulse Bomb, but that's about all it's going to be. Yaki throws one of his own because he knows a round is done, and the Florida Mayhem getting a bunch of value here out of the Widowmaker later in the round.
We talk a lot about Gargoyle Yaki, but I think BQB on like how he's played Ashe and Widow over the last few series that we've gotten an opportunity to see and cast. He's been phenomenal, and I think it's not like the flashy plays, it's not like putting up tons of big numbers, but being able to be pretty self-sufficient and not have to rely on like the entire team to turn and kind of make a play towards Striker or try and keep him alive. Like, he's able to defend himself pretty well against these flankers. up close, which allows them to play the Widow and the Ashe into a lot of these setups, and they don't have to really worry. They'll play Ashe with, let's see, probably Genji here. Yep, yeah, Yaki will play the Genji. So the Shock come out with Widowmaker yet again.
I mean, Ants obviously prefers the Widow to the Ashe as far as that we've seen. And Yaki will push up here early on. So he'll spot the Widow. And now the Mayhem kind of know that, all right, well, they don't really have the Ashe, so the shield here could be a big factor. Prevent Ants from getting an off angle, and we can really shut down their DPS. And already the front lines are clashing here between these two, and it's Troikoven and Smurf that come up second best.
You're going to lose this every time. If you're the Shock, you're going to lose this type of setup because, you know, playing the Genji Ashe against the Widow Tracer, you just have way better shield pressure with the Ashe in play. So if they're going to take that close quarter fight over at this choke that you see Yaki looking at here, and he's going to be able to silo the Widowmaker off to the side, you're going to have a huge advantage for the Florida Mayhem in terms of damage they're able to put down. Ants goes to Sombra right away. So they lose Striker here to Yaki, so you're not even going to be able to make a play. I think it's really worrying the types of like compositional changes they've made right away for the Shock. Like I think you would have liked to see them just play Ashe here and even go with Ashe Tracer into this Genji setup.
Yeah, Ashe Genji maybe not an option for San Francisco based on their personnel currently. Fate goes very low early on. He actually got hacked there. Was still able to get some shielding, but the rest of the Mayhem had to sort of back away behind that corner. You can see on the left from Yaki's POV. And Fate's close to a supercharger now. He bounced towards the point here as he wants to start a fight as soon as possible. Smurf already disintegrated, and the Shock are going to get completely crushed as a result.
It has been all Florida Mayhem, man, early. It's been a bad look for the Shock here, at least on map number 1. It'll be a Blade from Yaki. They're going to use the Gravitic Flux as well. So I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe you see the Shock. Well, actually, they're so close. I was going to say maybe they go to Winston Zarya here and really play like a dive, but you're so close to Supercharger and Gravitic Flux, you almost have to stay on it. Which, if you're not able to win this fight, any type of switch off is really like a last-ditch effort at that point.
You will have one fight after this. Ants, okay, actually being chased down by Yaki, forced to translocate fairly early. And that percentage is still ticking up. Striker has a pulse bomb here. He notices that Fate is fortified already, so he'll have an opportunity to actually get some significant damage and, again, test the healing bandwidth of the Mayhem. Gravitic Flux comes out, but Ant has already been taken down. Yaki keeping tabs on him for the entire round so far, but that's the double pulse for Striker. He was waiting for an opportunity and he found it. And at the nick of time, San Francisco finally enter the round and take the point, almost losing the map there.
Yeah, so they have to use everything to do it, though. So now the Florida Mayhem come back. They'll have an Amp Matrix to kick things off. They're probably going to be able to get a Gravitic Flux off of this. Let's see where the double pulse bomb came in. Beautiful. Ryan to Gangnam Jin's back. It takes out both supports.
Nice and clean there from Striker, already 42% of the way. You cannot allow this to happen. This is not the first time. The Gangnam Jin's been able to get that early pick, and it's their Amp Matrix. The Shock had no time to get away from it. Ants goes for the EMP, and he hits the front line of the Florida Mayhem, but Fate and Gargoyle seem unperturbed. Chris and Gangnam Jin still able to keep them alive, keep them topped up, but San Francisco, my God, they are behind the 8 ball this morning. Striker there will just have to try and stall the point. Troikoven's going to have to deal with 5 players from the Mayhem, keeping him at bay. And he won't be able to touch San Francisco. Starts well behind here as the Florida Mayhem make an early statement, looking vastly better on Busan.
Yeah, and you needed that EMP to be big from Ants towards the end there. And he connects with both tanks, but he does not connect with Gangnam Jin, so he just drops down from the high ground. You can do the big pulse AoE healing from the Batiste, drop the immortality field down. You're not in any worry of having either of those tanks drop as you're trying to take the point back. So the Florida Mayhem, they've looked very strong with this double shield setup here, over the last 2 games that we've casted. Although really early here against the Shock, I think if I was a Shock fan, I'd definitely be worried.
Yeah, where San Francisco really impressed us in the lead up here to the Countdown Cup, and against the Mayhem last time they played was with Winston Zarya, primarily. Yeah. Now, that's not an option. It has to be double shield, and so far, that looks a little more comfortable right now. depending on the map, you might still see that Winston combination come out, and we will be heading to map 2 in just a moment here, so still plenty of opportunities for San Francisco to chalk them up. Stick around. Map number 2 of the semi-final is right around the corner.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by Pringles Wavy. Big crunch, big flavor. The Overwatch League is brought to you by T-Mobile. Switch today and rank up to America's largest 5G network, T-Mobile. And by State Farm. For auto, home, or renters insurance, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
So we did lose the Summer Showdown semifinals to Paris, which was very unfortunate, but I think for us as a team, Shock really doesn't, we don't really try to dwell on that or try to want to get a rematch. We kind of just end up playing who we end up playing. It's kind of how it was in the playoffs also last year when we lost to Atlanta in the first round. We didn't really think about playing them again. We just decided to run it back, and then whatever happened is what happened. So I think we're just more focused on the tournament as a whole and not exactly Paris as an individual.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that from Super Matt. I mean, he's not trying to preempt anything, especially because there's no guarantee that San Francisco will be competing in that final match. Anyway, they need to deal with the Florida Mayhem, who look extremely comfortable so far, at least when it comes to playing that Orisa Sigma with the Ashe and Tracer.
Yeah, and for the Shock, they don't have the space for Alliance to really pop off and do a lot of things on that Widowmaker. And then the switching over to the Sombra didn't work out as well. We did have one sub coming in for map number 2. As I kind of alluded to earlier on, I think as expected, Byram comes in here for Chris. So this is what the Florida Mayhem do. They don't need any type of Lucio play on any of these points coming up on Eichenwald. So they bring in Byram for the double flex support setups.
San Francisco don't make any substitutions, so Arns stays in the lineup here as we're heading towards our payload map, which is, I mean, it could be considered interesting. I think it depends on the map. I believe it's Havana, so that would make a lot more sense. I mean, we saw Exi do a lot more on Widow on Havana than we... It's Eichenwald, sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, it's Eichenwald. I said it was Eichenwald, and then you said Havana. I was like, wait, what? I didn't get it wrong.
You second-guessed yourself. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, I did.
Still, obviously, opportunities to play the Widowmaker here on this map. We also have seen teams, though, try and make use of the Winston Zarya combinations, especially
Yes.
on offense, is to try and get control of the high ground in the second phase of the map, just to try and shift that double shield composition away from the high ground.
Right, I was going to say, with some verticality, like a map with verticality like this, maybe you see the Shock play the Winston Zarya. Smurf has looked incredible on the Winston as of late, so you can see why they would want to trend in that direction. And then if you're not going to play Widow or Ashe, and you have Ans just kind of defaulting to Sombra, it makes a bit of sense to go towards something like this where you potentially could run that type of dive setup.
And here we go, the Florida Mayhem and the San Francisco Shock now. There's a possibility we see some dive, but I really would expect Arns to stick to his guns in terms of that hit scan. And Florida, I mean, they're happy playing this same composition. I think that Fade is at his happiest when he's playing Orisa, even though he was quite the Winston in his heyday.
Yeah, and I saw Swing Chip put a tweet up from like warm-ups today from the Florida Mayhem. Swing Chip, the Florida Mayhem translator team manager, has a lot of great like behind the scenes like interaction tweets.
Hashtag bits of mayhem.
Yeah. Where Kuki was telling Yaki to make sure to keep tabs on Ons today, and then Yaki said, "I won't even give him room to breathe."
Well, it actually looked like that.
Yeah, that looked like it early on. So we do have a pause before we get into it. Looks like Byram, the Florida Mayhem, calling for it, as they'll be on defense here, but Byram, he'll be playing the Zen. So, like I mentioned, double flex support setups for the Florida Mayhem. When you see Byram come in, double shield, Ashe, Genji. Nothing surprising for the Florida Mayhem. I think if you're the Florida Mayhem and if you're Kuki, you stick with this strategy until they're able to beat it. If something for the Florida Mayhem, you were like, oh, well, they can't really play a lot of other setups. You don't need to if the other team can't break the one that you are putting out there.
I also don't think that with the current permutation of their lineup, I don't think San Francisco can necessarily match that. I know that Arns can play Tracer, he just doesn't. And I don't really expect to see Striker Genji. So I don't think that, Florida want to play, maybe even the Ashe Genji right now. Oh, San Francisco, sorry, should I say. So we'll see.
Hello.
I mean, Arns Doomfist?
What's interesting with the Eichenwald pick is with the verticality and how good like a Winston could be on this map. You also, the verticality is great for a hero like Genji. So, yep, here comes the Shock.
Okay.
You have the Winston Zarya setup, Sombra, Tracer, dive. With that, we'll see how they're able to make this work. Now a lot of pressure is going to come onto BQB. We mentioned a little bit earlier how good he is with dealing with some of that individual pressure. Now you're going to have Winston, Tracer, Sombra, a lot in your face. And just look at how he hunts. Like, you don't really see a lot of other, like, Ashes, or even when he's playing the Widow, like, go and take these duels and want these duels. But he puts so much pressure on the opposing team's Tracers.
Yeah, okay, was that an early bubble on Smurf or not one at all? It's kind of hard to tell. Smurf died.
It looks like it just got blown up.
Yeah, he takes about 70% of his health, and then Choikobin bubbles himself as Smurf was sort of sitting under his own dome there. Then Smurf died, so not quite sure how that happened. And bear in mind, BQB's been very self-sufficient dealing with flankers. But Florida aren't playing Brigitte right now, and San Francisco have a lot of dives, so we'll see how long it takes for the dam to break. Okay, it was a bubble there early on Smurf, but he gets blown up by the Discord orb.
So I was going to say, without the Brig, like, yeah, you're a little bit worried because of the Brig provides a lot in terms of, like, anti-dive, but having the Zen in play, you're able to just burn this nice shot there from BQB, just one tap to the head. You're able to burn down the Winston before he's able to really go in and make an impact, as that was a blade there used from Yaki as well. Because to remind all you guys at home, this is not the nerf to Genji. This is still like the pretty strong Genji with a fast right click. So Discord Orb on a Winston, some shots from Sigma, Orisa, and this version of Genji, and that Winston's good as dead.
Nano boost here for Twilight, so Smurf at least won't get blown up as quickly if he gets Nano this time around. Choikobin. Okay, so yeah, Nano on a Smurf as he gets into the Honey Lodge here and trying to pressure the supports down. Immediate Immortality field thrown down by Gangnam Jin, but Byram is still removed here. Fate out of the pitch here. A 2-for-1 trade thus far, but San Francisco have also lost Arts and Striker, so the only DPS is probably coming from Smurf right now, who has plenty of it with that nano boost. Violet gets involved as well. And with the nano boost, San Francisco are able to break through. Despite losing both Arts and Striker, they managed to reduce those health bars to 0.
They had to use almost everything, though. A Primal, EMP, Rally, Nano to be able to take the point. Now we'll see if the Shock's composition really pays off, as it looks like Florida, they want to play this close here at the gate. You play close, you allow BQB a lot of free range over the high ground, and there it is, BQB able to take out Striker yet again.
Did Striker just recall into that?
Yeah, I believe they got him weak. He was inside the castle, Striker, just lurking around.
BQB though had an approximate idea of
the
where
Striker
Striker would
Genji.
appear. Okay. How much data do we have on this year?
This year, not much, but if you remember back to last season, Striker was practicing a lot of different heroes for the Shock. We didn't see him a ton because they obviously had Sinatra and Rascal and then Goats for a lot of it. But Genji was one of the heroes that he was practicing, along with putting in tons of hours on Widowmaker.
Yeah. All right, here's the bubble again, given over to Smurf. He dives in, Discord Orb applied immediately, and he is done. Yaki gets to the back line and removes Twilight, so the lion's share of healing also taken away from San Francisco. In a heartbeat, they lose the tip of the spear and the half behind it.
Florida just pushing up, taking space, getting some extra ult charge in some of their players. They lose Yaki, and this will be a Choyobin using the grab here. Well, they get, so what happened is they get Yaki and they think maybe they can kind of take advantage of the tanks being pushed up so far. They actually get BQB here as well, so you'll have to back up a little bit. And with the grab, maybe you're able to take out the tanks, buy yourself a ton of extra space, but they aren't able to do that with the grab.
Okay, so you buy yourself some cart progress, but you don't deny the high ground from San Francisco. Now Strike is down and Smurf can't linger up here.
You're asking a lot of Striker here, by the way. To just kind of pick up the Genji and play it into like BQB and Yaki. It's a huge ask.
The McCree switch from BQB, it's going to be a 3-player EMP connected though, and again, when the ultimates come online for San Francisco, they win the fight pretty convincingly.
Yep. I mean, that's how this composition works, right? But the way it's supposed to work is you kind of cycle like 1 or 2 ultimates. They're big game-changing winning ultimates, teamfight winning ultimates consistently, and then you have some more for the next fight, and then you kind of snowball. The way the Shock are having to do it right now is they have to pretty much expend everything to get a teamfight win.
Okay, running from Violet here, he sees the supercharger go down from Fate. Violet wants to push up as much as he can, but Smurf's already gone down. And there's an amplification matrix in place, so Violet can't even peek towards the right. BQB surges ahead. Flashbang at the ready. And San Francisco, yeah, they're going to get kicked back to spawn now. And Choyobin probably really feeling the lack of Graviton surge there. Throwing it here into that door that Yaki was just looking at may have given enough space for San Francisco to set up, even with Air Matrix in play.
It's like
okay, you're nutty. You're cracked.
This just stays for a little bit too long. As Onstaudy had to pick on a Byram there. Byram doesn't even pop the Transcendence. So you have this Transcendence for the Florida Mayhem when the Dragon Blade comes in from Striker. No defensive ultimate here for the Shock to deal with the one that'll come through from Yaki. And even the Gravitic Flux here from Gargoyle.
Inside of 30 seconds remaining for San Francisco's attack on Eichenwald. They do not have EMP, no Primal. They may not have a nano boost at this rate. That's a pretty robust Gravitic Flux there. BQB's gone down early in the fight, though, and Yaki really needs to turn things around with the blade. Strike has been removed, and Yaki doesn't fancy trying for any more. It's a 1-for-1 trade, but Striker will return with a Dragon Blade as Fate tries to hold the ground on the bridge.
Yeah, you're gonna have to use the nano boost here onto Smurf to just keep him alive, and Twilight takes out Yaki, so be a Deadeye coming in from the side here. It doesn't look like he can get anything. Now the blade has to be big.
Striker looking for this McCree kill, still needs to respect, but he's gonna go into blade anyway, and he finds BQB. Transcendence from Byram, a little bit too late to keep the McCree alive, but most of the Florida Mayhem are still here. That EMP hits them very hard though. They had to group up for the Transcendence, so they were sitting ducks for the EMP. Trickle a couple plays in now, but that cut is so darn close. And yes, San Francisco get themselves a 90-second extension of time, and they can head into the castle phase.
Yeah, not pretty, but you're still able to get that point, though, for the Shock. See, though, do they have enough time and ultimates to really push it over the line? Is Choi trying to set up here the Grav play? If you can win a fight here with just Grav, you have a lot of ultimates to use towards the end.
Choi's waiting with the Graviton Surge here. Okay, so Bubble, Winston goes for the grab. Okay, the Immortality kill was well placed though by Florida. They're able to benefit from that hugely. That grab just holds them together. Eventually San Francisco are able to surge ahead though. They push through and they get rid of Gargoyle first. And with Fate down, there's no shields left for Florida. And this is where Choi Hyobin just gets to chase after individuals. And Byram,
he knows Byram's around here somewhere.
Slip. The cart gets across the line though. And San Francisco get to bypass a lot of the back and forth that often happens in that last part of the map.
Yeah, really good ending there for the Shock. It didn't look good for a lot of that map. I do wonder, what do they run here on D? Do you start off with like a... do you want to play the Winston on defense? Do you want to play... probably like the safest would be playing Orisa Sigma with Ons on like Ashe, but we haven't seen him play Ashe so far. Striker as well. Like, do you play Tracer on defense? Do we maybe see Tracer play the Striker play the Genji again? Interested what we see here from San Francisco. Ah,
Striker now.
Sombra. Yeah. Sombra Ashe.
Now, Striker is a Tracer aficionado. This probably isn't a huge stretch for him to sort of pick up the Sombra.
I mean, Striker's just an incredible all-around player, right? I mean, you could even make a case like Ons is really, really strong at the hit scan. But you can make a case that Striker is just as good.
I don't think there are actually many players like Striker who spend so long on the bench only to return as a mainstay rather rapidly. Last year, he was really nowhere to be seen, but he remained with the Shock and was able to hone, presumably, his skills on a vast array of different heroes. Now we get to showcase that. And what better time as the Shock fighting to stay alive here. They do not want to head into a 0-2 halftime, but that's looking increasingly likely. See what they can get done now. Arns finally goes to the Ashe.
You will have less shield pressure here for the Shock, so you'll most likely lose this shield battle. Because the Genji is quite strong at that as well, but you want to try and punish Yaki when he comes in. Maybe get a hack on a Yaki.
I mean, you can see that from BQB's perspective, right? It's just like smashing shields, continuing to step up, huge hit on Striker. That's going to force an early translocate. It was just a sliver of health, and BQB lingers a little bit too long in the line of sight of Arns, and he combines well with Violet to find that pick off. Now Arns can wrap around a little bit, but Trickobin has been felled. Florida have the shields to work with, and now they have an Amp Matrix, and Striker gets minced.
Yeah, I mean, you see it from... So when we talk about, like, shield pressure and just, like, the output of damage, I think sometimes it's really difficult to see that in terms of, like, play. But right there, you saw the Shock being forced to back up every single time. All they had to do is back. That tells you that the shields just are not lasting as long as they would have liked. And I mean, Sombra is not a hero who's going to put tons of shield pressure down. You want to capitalize on people overextending with hacks, maybe get a hack onto one of the players who you can deploy a shield, whether it be Fate or Gargoyle, a Discord Orb, and then finish them off. If you can't provide that, Sombra doesn't really provide a lot of like front-loaded damage that you see. I mean, Striker doing it now, but that's not really what Sombra's about. So you lose out in a big way.
Striker just wants to build that EMP as quickly as he possibly can. Smurf, oh man, lucky to stay alive there, but the Holt is going to make things a little harder. Bob is now deployed in a flanking position for the Shock, so they've got threats in front and behind. In Twilight, looks like he was just a little bit overloaded in terms of
they get nothing out of that EMP.
I mean, Florida backed away. Now they're going to use a lot of their ultimates, though, Matt. It's going to be Transcendence from Byram and the Blade from Yaki to find two. Fate had already used Supercharger, and in fairness, Florida used a lot in that fight.
Yeah, Florida kicks things off with a Bob. Bob goes on the flank, then the EMP comes through, and they had already used a Supercharger at that point. And kind of have to expel all ultimates. Ooh, you lose onto your light. That one stings a bit.
And you are continuing to backpedal now as San Francisco. This next fight, they need to get a good position to use this Amp Matrix in. They would prefer to use it on the bridge, but they have to settle for it in this opening now just outside of spawn. They're still able to catch the front line of the Mayhem though, and all's well that ends well in that regard. And they'll get the stabilize and actually set up here on the bridge.
Yeah, it's a big fight win. You come in, you just use Amp Matrix. That means you're allowed to hold on to the Supercharger for the next fight. Supercharger, one of the more high-impact ultimates in terms of fight win percentages, so
it's
they're able to
always
use
been
this.
like that, right?
Yeah.
Kind of it's a sleeper pick for the most impactful ultimate when it comes to winning team fights with it.
Obviously, gives everybody else around you a damage boost. It also is like a stationary item that you can just put behind like a shield, so it's really difficult to destroy, like moving into a team who has a damage boost.
It also needs to be destroyed. I mean, you can see just how important it is for Immortality Field that needs to be destroyed first, and it has like a decent amount of health.
Yeah.
Here's another Supercharger. Looks like they're playing Cat's Cradle out there. The Shock and Byram. Okay, Smurf, extreme range, able to find that pick.
Lifts him up. A few shots in with the Supercharger onto the Zen. That'll be a pick-off. So now the Shock's starting to mount defensive stand. This will be Ons taking out Yankee with the Dynamite. Ons building up towards a Bob. Striker now with another EMP. This is how the defense is supposed to work with this comp.
This is a consequence, though, of Florida using, I would say, 4 or 5 ultimates in their first fight in this second phase, right? That's when, there was a flank Bob, there was Transcendence Blade, a ton of stuff going on, and now Florida just had to wait a little while to build them up, but they've given San Francisco time to develop their own ultimate bank. Now, EMP might be able to get a little bit more value now that we're out in the open as opposed to the start of this part of the map.
I was going to say, he's going to wait until they get out here on the bridge. Kind of hides here in the corner. Florida knows this. That's why you see Gangnam Jin hiding down by the stairs. He comes out now with an Amp Matrix, but
Gangnam Jin's in deep trouble.
See, I mean, you have him live. They probably want to try and hide him, knowing that there's got to be an EMP coming.
It's a later Amp Matrix here for the Shock, and they have an Immortality Field right now, whereas the Mayhem had to use theirs earlier on because of the Bobs. Neither team gets value out of that Batiste ultimate. That's so fascinating. BQB, and that's incidental. Arts is able to catch him there with the Dynamite. And that just goes to show how taxed your healing bandwidth gets when you're dealing with an enemy Amp Matrix, right? I mean, TNT, it's not that much damage, but if you can't keep your team topped up, then someone might just die to the explosion.
So you have an EMP here for the Shock.
Wait, what a way to open it up,
and this time,
an absolutely gargantuan halt, and it's going to take more than this rather lackluster Gravitic Flux to stop the Mayhem, and I mean,
that is a gut punch if there ever was one.
You cannot count on that, but that's why the bridge of this map is so treacherous.
It is, but I mean, that's brutal.
I mean, Smurf just woke up in Jumanji, man. He has no idea what happened. He yanked off of that bridge, and now the Mayhem, they're on the run.
You didn't even have to use Blade here for Florida. Now it'll be... Okay, so they use the Gravitic Flux to force out Transcendence. That means Yaki gets a free Blade.
And to save execution, apparently, Yaki's able to skitter away while the Shock was trying to focus him down. San Francisco now are forced to part with some key ultimates, and the Mayhem are happy to let them do this. Supercharger, no one's there to see it. It's just an ornament. No, we're not interior designers, we're Overwatch players, Troy.
It buys space, and it buys time. So it allows the Shock to get control of that corner yet again. Amp Matrix will do the same. We'll see when they decide to use it. They get a halt now, the Amp Matrix.
Great accretion.
Nice, and the hack.
Yaki, a little confuzzled right now. Don't blame the guy. There is no one there to get rid of the blade. Now, that's a translocator to remove a Striker. That may or may not be important. Depends on how much pressure Striker gets put on him in the next few seconds. Look at his Amp Matrix. Look at how much the Shock are forced to bend around this corner now. We're in under a minute for the Florida Mayhem here in the San Francisco Shock. Coming out to make this close. Violet goes down. Fate finds him, and the cart gets home. but it's going to be a close one. A scant 8 seconds separates these two after their attacking rounds.
A really good defense from the San Francisco Shock. They started to put together a good kind of flow in terms of ultimates and using them properly. You gotta just wonder and question, if Fate doesn't get that double halt off the side, is this map over in favor of the Shock? Like, there's a really good chance with the ultimates they had available and the position that the cart was, that it probably would have been able to at least get that into OT at the time we were at. And just a huge play from Fate. You can't even, I mean, where the EMP comes through, like, the halt was earlier than this, so this was the EMP with the flux that came through. The halt was a little bit earlier than that. And, I mean, just a halt that takes out the Orisa plus the Ashe on that bridge. You almost couldn't pick two better players off.
And you see San Francisco's response is then to use two ultimates in a very, very unimpressive fashion, right? EMP completely whiffs, and the Gravitic Flux, it was just desperation. Florida forced errors right there from San Francisco. The Shock need to find their footing here. They're still in it, very much so. And this first push is everything for both of these teams. San Francisco come out of the gates with the Tracer and the Ashe, so finally they're reverting to what considered to be a little bit more regular. But they lose both of their support. They're trying to rotate, and in the meantime, Violet and Twilight just get mulched.
They're going to put pressure on the Smurf here, try and get him out of the equation. Yep, now he's going to get a longer respawn. I mean, Smurf's not going to get back in the fight till, 15 seconds left. He may even have to switch off.
This is dangerous. Gangnam Jin may have an amp matrix while the Shock are trying to rotate to the point here, and he might be able to catch them off guard.
This is all on Striker to touch.
Definitely get there with the Tracer. That's maybe not the concern. Choigoven, well, I mean, yeah, you get accreted if you're trying to go for Connect Grass. That's not too shocking. Okay, Immortality Field already has to be used. Not good, and it's taken down now. The Florida Mayhem can lean into this a little more. And San Francisco are stuck inside this room. They go for an Amp Matrix. Gangnam Jin's used one of his own now. And that's Florida's Immortality Field that gets used there. Despite using their field first, San Francisco able to find a pick on Yaki early. And they're going to roll over the top of them. Unbelievable stuff here. San Francisco now in position to work this point. Gravitic Flux for Gargoyle gets them up in the air, and a bit of breathing room wasn't really what the Mayhem needed. San Francisco take point A in an unlikely fashion.
Just the pick from Violet to be able to take out Yaki. Yaki probably would have had a blade during this. But that early pickoff is massive there as the Zen for the Shock takes out the Genji for the Mayhem. And now, how do the Mayhem decide to play this? They want to play close. Striker lurking with a pulse bomb here. Go up to the high ground now. Yeah, they spot him quickly. Fast recall.
They have to know what he's looking for. He takes a bit of damage even as he tries to escape. But he'll be back. Sure as the sun rises, he'll return. All right. Transcendence had to be used there for the Gravitic Flux. Twilight goes down early, and this is the Mayhem trying to end things now before they get too much more out of hand. Yaki gets that blade he was forced to sit on. And it gets what he was looking for now. Gangnam Jin playing from the high ground here, drops down, Amp Matrix deployed, Shokyobin disintegrated. But San Francisco, I mean, they got away with absolute murder on point A.
I mean, that is as good as you can almost ask for, right? I mean, obviously you would have loved to see the cart go a little bit further, but just being able to take point A and then at least give yourself one fight opportunity once the gate opens is a pretty good scenario to find yourselves in when the other team only has 1 minute and 8 on the clock.
It's not a foregone conclusion that any team takes point A with the time that they have left. So Florida probably pretty disgruntled, especially because they forced San Francisco to use their Immortality Field so early in that fight for essentially nothing. Florida don't actually have to wager anything to sort of tease that very important cooldown out of San Francisco. That's, I mean, rough for them, especially because they set the fight up really well until they just got randomly a player picked off because Answers just kind of cracked.
So now we'll see the Florida Mayhem on offense. I think what would be scary for the Shock is let's say like the fight like lingers a little bit here, and you know, maybe like Violet's taken out early, Yaki getting a Blade before you have an opportunity to get Transcendence would be something you definitely worry about as the cart would get closer to the Golden Box of Victory.
Sure.
I still think though the Shock have given themselves a great chance to take Eichenwald, which, considering where we were a few seconds ago, I know even well, a few minutes ago really, where Fate gets a double halt and the Mayhem complete with a little bit better time, they have really turned it around.
Gargoyle leads the way. Look at that kinetic grasp. 727 effective health points there after shielding. And the rest of his team just file in behind him. BQB playing fairly safely here from this sort of hardware shop and Violet gets picked up early. Matt, you kind of mentioned it there. Looked like a Halt into Accretion combo. Textbook stuff from the Mayhem.
Yeah, Halt, Accretion, and one shot finishes him off. As now you have to use Immortality Field here really early. I don't know if you're going to be able to keep this going if you're the Shock.
That's a big dynamite.
You lose Smurf, yeah. But look at where this is going to put you in terms of ult charge for the Shock. It wasn't a long fight. Like, Twilight will have this Ant Matrix. You'll have one as well, though, for the Florida Mayhem. The Mayhem going to get very close to a Bob here, too.
So most of the Mayhem push up and try and establish an early foothold here, right? They're trying to colonize Mars, essentially. Get some forces positioned forward early, and then get 3 on the card here. Just try and make it a little bit easier to get close, but either way, it's going to be an overtime, Matt.
Double Ant Matrix. We'll see if there's like a difference in terms of Bob. Yaki didn't really do that much, so you're not worried about a Blade at all, which is quite nice.
Ant Matrix and Twilight, look at how low Gargoyle went. Did they get blown up? Troy Coben is able to find Gargoyle with the Accretion there. Knocked up now, the Bob comes in, but Smurf's the only one down so far in San Francisco, fighting their gear at just the right time, Matt. It's one apiece here in this series.
The Immortality Field, I would love to know whether it was on like cooldown and he just popped it right away, but it just seemed like it was so late there from Gangnam Jin to potentially keep Fate and Byram alive. And as soon as you lose those 2 players, everything falls apart there for the Mayhem on offense as the Shock bounce back and win map number 2.
Looked like, Matt, it was a Halt Accretion, the very combo that allowed the Mayhem to take point A. The Shock leveraged back at them, and it looks like Florida's Own Medicine was a bitter pill to swallow indeed. Sick map, about as close as you could ask for.
Gangnam Jin with 30k healing that map on the Batiste.
Yeah, I mean, which is 71% of his team's overall healing. For context, I mean, Violet and Twilight, it's like 41 and 55% for Twilight. So that is absurd.
It's crazy.
And we are seeing just how quickly these Ant Matrices are being sort of developed, how much healing's being done, and how quickly someone can get picked off as a result.
Right.
The gameplay is more volatile now that Batiste is building those ultimates so fast, and out of nowhere, people are getting Halt accreted or just hit with an Ant Matrix and dying.
With Ant Matrix and then like a long-range stun like an Accretion, it just becomes way more lethal. And especially with the hero like Ashe, you can already like one-shot some of the squishier targets with a headshot, pretty much like a little bit of damage boost. So now you give the window with the Ant Matrix, and you see people drop pretty quick.
I mean, we knew it when we saw the card. This series was one that was going to deliver, but now we're actually seeing it in real life. There's a score to be settled after our halftime here as both of these teams vie for a spot in our grand finals of the Countdown Cup. Stick around. We're going to head to our desk for a game break and have our experts break down the action, and then we return for the conclusion of this blockbuster series.
Let them up.
Coca-Cola is the official refreshment of the Overwatch League.
Welcome back to the Game Break, presented by Cheez-It Grooves. Reinforce here once again with the chaotic energy alongside Costa, and we're here to break down all the action so far after 2 maps. It's been a pretty even series so far, Scott. Pretty even. I don't think we really expected it to be this close, but Florida Mayhem, they're really bringing it so far.
Yeah, it was like a really interesting off-the-bat aggressive style from the Florida Mayhem. The San Francisco Shock seemed to come out and like try and do their dive on map 1, but it feels like the Florida Mayhem are just so ready for this, and the Shock can't really get any of the space that they usually get from other teams.
Yeah, going into that first map, of course, Busan, I think that we had some questions about the compositions of the San Francisco Shock. Obviously came out with double shield on Mecha Base and stuff, but they were playing a lot of Tracer Sombra, etc., and they couldn't really get it going. It does feel like Florida Mayhem, they have the better double shield composition going. Do you feel like it's more Florida Mayhem winning the game, or do you think it's San Francisco Shock maybe being a bit too eager with their compositions, maybe trying a bit too hard in that regard? Who do you think is winning this match between the two teams?
I honestly think it's going to come down to the map type and the style that it ends up being. Like, we both agreed as it was happening that I don't understand why the San Francisco Shock is playing double shield, but then also playing a Tracer Sombra. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Those two things are counterintuitive to each other. So I think when we start going more to map 2, like, I don't know what you think, but it felt like Arn sort of took over that game on his hit scan a little bit, and that sort of kept the Mayhem in check.
Yeah, I mean, the San Francisco Shock going to Eichenwalde, it does feel still like they're trying to make this double hit scan kind of thing work. Obviously, it's a really good map when it comes to making the Ash work, etc., because you have that high ground. They were playing a bit more dive, which Smurf on that Winston, I mean, he's just insane on this character. His Primal Rages really made stuff happen for the San Francisco Shock at times. But then we saw Striker on the Sombra, and this is the part where I'm like, are you maybe pushing your limits a little bit too hard? They did make it happen a few times, but it's a pretty unconventional strategy in that regard. So I still feel like the San Francisco Shock, maybe they should just commit to one style here. Maybe you should put Ans on that Sombra or Striker on that Sombra. Do you think that the San Francisco Shock can really match the Florida Mayhem when it comes to this double shield composition? Or do you feel like they have to implement some of these unorthodox picks into the mix?
I think if you're going to have Arns and Striker in the lineup, they at some point they played Arns on the Sombra and Striker on the Genji, and I can just say one thing is that ain't it. Like, especially when you're going against the Mayhem, like, it felt like they were sort of forcing themselves into a corner. I just think you need to have Arns on the hit scan, especially if he's going up against BQB. He is getting the better of it for the most part, but I want to see Striker just play a comfort hero. Like, I don't hate the Sombra that much on Striker, but I don't want to see him ever really moving towards that Genji.
All right, so the teams are currently tied 1-1, of course, and that's very intriguing for the remainder of the series. But for our crunch time, presented by Cheez-It Groups, we wanted to go a bit deeper about the Florida Mayhem, because they came out the gates and looked very impressive on this double shield composition. And I mean, they're doing the Florida Mayhem thing, right?
Yeah.
They're relying on the fundamentals. They're not really doing things too complicated. Yaki on the Genji has been solid for them so far and pulled out those Dragon Blades as well and really turned some of these team fights around. Can we talk about a little bit, what is the win condition for this Florida Mayhem squad? Because they won one map so far, and there's a good possibility that they actually might now win this series. So what do we want to see from the Florida Mayhem for the remainder of this series?
I feel like I said it yesterday, and I remember you being like giddy about it, is when I said like the Florida Mayhem, I think they are one of the best double shield conventional styles.
You said the best. You said the best double shield in
Yeah,
NA.
I think it is the best. Like, honestly, I think when they played this BQB on the Ashe, Fade on the Orisa, Gargo on the Sigma, and Yaki on the Genji or the Tracer, I actually think they look the best just at this style. I think they really have the coordination, the synergy down. Where they usually fall flat is other teams that sort of find a way to not allow them to play that conventional style. And that's what I was really hoping the San Francisco Shock was going to bring out. But unfortunately, they haven't really come up with a solution. They sort of brute force their way a little bit of it on Iconworld, but I don't think that's a viable strategy. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, I do think I agree with you. Yeah, I think, you know, looking at this matchup, I think for the Florida Mayhem, you know, if you just keep it like very straightforward, fundamentally sound, and you play some of these maps that favor your compositions, make it hard for the San Francisco Shock to dive, I think in that mirror composition, you actually have a good chance of beating San Francisco a lot of the time, because we've seen what the Florida Mayhem players can do. So that's going to be our crunch time, presented by Cheez-It Grooves. Now we're going into the second half. Do we want to see some more dive coming out of the San Francisco Shock here? Because we have some substitutions. So Rascal is coming back into the mix. I tell you who he's subbing out for, but, you know, given it's my first time to host, I've actually forgotten who he's actually coming in for. But it's Ans coming out, and Rascal is back into the mix. So we saw Rascal a little bit yesterday. What do you think Rascal is going to bring into this Shock squad?
We've seen them do that a little bit in the past where they play like the Mei on defense and then he plays Genji on offense. I expect to see a little bit of that, but I usually expect Arns to stay in, right, and play that hit scan. Or maybe they really want to do what we're talking about and play the dive?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of teams playing the dive composition, honestly, and it has worked, specifically in the APAC region, right? So the question is, does Shock feel so comfortable playing the dive against a team like Florida Mayhem, just like bet all the marbles on playing Winston dive? Because Smurfs, you know, fantastic Winston, you make space for Violet. By going aggressive, no one will really touch Violet in the backline, right? So he can do his thing. I really like the dive style coming out of the San Francisco Shock. And you can talk about the Genjis, you know, not being good enough, but like, I think that they're, you know, good enough on that regard. Maybe they're not Sparkle, but they're still really good. They're really good Genjis here. So Rascal coming into the mix, I think he's able to bring some of the chaos to the Shock lineup that might throw Florida Mayhem off their game. So do you agree with me there? Do you have any predictions for the second half? What do you want to see from these teams?
I think the Shock is a team that's very good at learning on the fly. I think they're sort of filling out what the Florida Mayhem can do. I think they got very fortunate in the fact that they did clinch that Icon Ward at the end, because if they were down 0-2, I would start to question it, but I think Shock's ability to bring it back from here, I think, is a good chance.
All right, well, there you have it. That's going to be our game break presented by Cheez-It Grooves. And now we're heading into the second half with our casters, Mitch and Matt.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by Cheez-It Grooves. Deep flavor, deep crunch. It's a mind crunch. The Overwatch League. The Overwatch League is brought to you by HyperX. Unleash your style, unleash your fury with HyperX Fury Memory. And by Coca-Cola, the official refreshment of the Overwatch League.
Welcome back, everybody, to our first semi-final of our Countdown Cup here. I'm Mitch Leslie, joined by Matt Morello. Thanks for sticking around through the break. And the semi-final so far has been pretty spicy.
Yeah.
Eichenwald was definitely a closer affair than our first map, where it looked like San Francisco were able to lean a little bit more into the double shield setup.
But I think Florida kind of let them off the hook a little bit. I think Florida, they made a really nice comeback. I think the Fate halt off the side was a huge play. And you saw the tweet from Swingchip where Kuki's kind of talking to the team like, hey, like, we did not practice like that. Like, we should not have lost that map. And you know, towards the end, they kind of had some blunders. And I feel like you give the Shock a little bit of space. They're going to do that, and then now you let them back into a series where you could have been up 2-0. For a lot of teams, that's like a death trap.
And, you know, Kuki was sort of cancelling the players to sort of try and be one step ahead. Pretty hard, I think, to sort of pass the game out strategically when, you know, you're down to, like, what, last minute of overtime. You have, you know, only a few seconds left. And generally, like, the ult economy, for example, looked quite good from the Florida Mayhem. You know, Johnny sort of brought up, he said he sort of felt, at least earlier on in the series, that Florida had like a better double shield composition. It definitely looked that way when we were on Busan. But then it took us ages to see Arns actually play Ashe, and then he looked very good, and now he's been subbed out.
Right, so he will go out, it'll be Rascal who comes in, and when Rascal comes in, depending on what the map is, I believe the next map is Hanamura, you will see him play some Mei. They can play Mei, Genji. You can still play hit scan stuff. You can still play Striker on Ashe, Widowmaker, etc. So you don't really lose that much. You just gain some flexibility of what you can do on the defensive end.
And we also saw Rascal bust out, the Genji, right? So we've seen him played out recently. I think it was first speculated back when there was the whole discussion about, was it Super to play Genji? Then Tayo joined. Why wasn't Rascal doing it?
He was the most logical solution, right? To the Genji problem.
Outwardly, anyway, from what we can see. You know, like, the Super said, like, listen, you know, we tried a couple Genji options, and the reason that I played is because, you know, the coach sort of felt like I was one of the, you know, memes aside, that I was one of the best options. So it's possible that Rascal, maybe he's gone back, he's put in some extra time on the Genji just to make sure it's really tip-top. But we're going to see him again today. Likely play some of that, but he's a jack of all trades, not unlike, you know, some of the other DPS that have been sat on this bench in the past. Answer's maybe a little bit more focused in his hero pool. Rascal, though, bit of everything.
And this is a Florida Mayhem map pick after losing Eichenwald, which the Shock decided to take us to. The Shock are 10-0 on this map. So the Florida Mayhem must feel very confident in their game here on Hanamura. They also may feel confident knowing that the substitution of they were going to force to be play Genji here in some capacity.
San Francisco now look like they're going to be... I mean, this is the composition that you need to be, you know, sort of tip-top at. This needs to be sort of your strongest look right now, the double shield with the Genji and the Ashe. Trico in there as well. You notice he's trying to use his tech to get up on the ledge.
0 for 2.
There we go.
There you go.
There.
1 for 3, not bad.
He's one of the first players that I saw do it. It's not that easy. You have to time to jump really well with the Hypersphere coming back at you, but he's got up there. And now we'll see if the Mayhem can... Oh, my God.
See you later.
Rascal. Oh! I don't even know how BQB saw Trico over there, but he's able to pick him off, and 3 players have already fallen from San Francisco. He's got kicked in the breadbasket.
It's what you can do, though. Like we have not seen Rascal play that much in a live game. In a while, especially on like Genji, right? Like, I say in a while, I mean like significantly consistent, like in terms of playtime, to where you play against a team that is so good at comboing like the halts with the accretions, like the Florida Mayhem. You may be able to take advantage of that and manufacture some picks.
Yaki's definitely feeling antsy there. He Doesn't hit any of those shurikens, and he still dashes forward into melee range. Then realizes, wait a minute, I don't want to be here at all. As the Deflect can get out. Okay, Amp Matrix used, and the Mayhem looked very well drilled on this map, Matthew. They all knew exactly what they had to do. Shocker trying to shelter on the stairwell right now, and Rascal comes out of nowhere and picks off Gangnam Jin. And the Mayhem
That's a
gonna be
fast
forced
pick.
back.
Yeah, right after they use their Amp Matrix, Rascal comes in, gets a pick off, and we make it. Yeah, it was not enough though. He was ticking from the damage of the dynamite, then a shot came through from Striker. So another kill comes in for the Shock as they start to stabilize on the defensive end.
Okay, starting to get value out of that Genji now. Rascal is playing that sort of off angle, threatening a flank. And Florida basically need Yaki to duel him, to control him in some way or another. Or Yaki needs to push forward and try and find the back line, which is much harder in this situation. All right, Bob, go stay on the point. There you go. That's what you've been trained for. Literally take up space. You're like the tree in the high school play, you know?
Well, there he is.
And there he
He's
went.
gone.
Rascal plans to be more than a warm prop, unlike Bob. And you can see that the Yaki's up on the ledge. So, again, it's going to be Rascal v Yaki a little bit here as they just try and sort of vie for supremacy in space. Because if the Shock let BQB get set up on that ledge, it's going to be pretty bad for them.
Just trying to vie for high ground dominance here.
Yep.
So Gargoyle and Yaki have moved up towards that high ground on the ledge, and then they're going to put Fate on the point to try and contest.
Ah, yes. The quick Bob. The deadly Bob. Striker already loses his, but Rascal's found BQB. So again, San Francisco are not letting this ledge go. They're still contesting it, and Rascal's found a second player. San Francisco have a Genji that is getting it done in a big way.
I mean, after that initial moment of getting picked off on A, Rascal's been really strong here.
I mean, the guy got
Genji.
halted into like an accretion.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't think it was any point where we were like, what, Rascal bad? But that's fine. That's like 6 kills in a row for Rascal. Very cool.
Goes and cleans up a few players. I heard Hex on the pre-show. He's like, man, I just wanted Rascal to play more because I thought he was going to be the MVP of the league. I was like, yeah. And I think I kind of thought back. I was like, I'm pretty sure I thought as well. Like, I think Rascal's that good of a player. It's just for a lot of moments during this season, they haven't been able to run him or fit him into lineups.
But now, it's like a glove. Dragon Blade available for Rascal here, and Florida are still unable to really actually find their footing as they push into point B. They want this ledge, or they want the high ground. One of them has to be taken control of. So now by forcing Rascal back, he dashes out. So this is where Florida, again, it's a quick switch. They move out with a supercharger. It's either that or the Amp Matrix in cases like this. And San Francisco quickly back up.
Well, that's because Florida knows they can trade that supercharger for the Amp Matrix, and they'll have an Amp Matrix of their own to use.
Okay, Yaki goes into a Transcendence here, so he's not going to get anything from the plane. Rascal also dealing with Transcendence. It's an Amp Matrix after the smoke clear is still available for the Florida Mayhem, though, so the Shock now need to give up more ground. And once more, San Francisco are in a compromising spot. They have to find a way to regain this high ground control whilst contesting the point as well. That's a good start. Byram goes down to Rascal, who eventually has to trade himself out for it. But with Yaki missing now, San Francisco, I mean, you do not want to be caught in this small room against Trickoven's Hyperspheres, but that's where the Mayhem are.
And this offense for the Florida Mayhem started with, what, like 6 minutes as BQB gets 2 exit kills here, one on the Striker, one on a Violet. I now got the clock down to 1 minute and 40 seconds. The Mayhem try and use their Amp Matrix up on the high ground and catch some players in the stairwell for the Shock, like still trying to get aggressive with the Blade, potentially. And they get absolutely nothing.
I mean,
they don't get anything out of that.
Right? And then the Shock just kind of go to the low ground and sort of fight from there. Credit to San Francisco, man, because they give up all the high ground and they still manage to get Rascal in position to get pickoffs.
And now if you're the Mayhem, you're walking into a lot of ultimates here. Gravitic Flux, an Amp Matrix, most likely Supercharger here eventually. Very difficult, because what, you're gonna, if you wait this out, you'll get what, your Amp Matrix and a Bob? Like, they still have a big ultimate advantage.
Rascal currently deadlifting the Shock on Genji, by the way. 7 of 11 of the Shock's kills have been from that Genji. Chocoban, that is a lot of shield from Kinetic Grasp, and Rascal once again takes a foray into enemy territory. Doesn't want to let them get too comfortable here on this sledge. Florida don't have a Supercharger or an Air Matrix to work with right now, so they can't really get as much value out of this high ground as they would like. Gargoyle needs an Immortality kill to be given to him, and so it is. Now the Blade can do more work.
Yeah, you might be able to get aggressive and with their Supercharger Blade and then Transcendence as well. Oh, a dash through.
I mean, we kind of saw it coming, Matt. That is now 11 final blows and 2 deaths for Rascal, taking over this game single-handedly on the Genji, and there's only 10 seconds left for the Florida Mayhem, and, well, Rascal's quite the gatekeeper now.
Wow. Takes out BQB. He had the bomb to be able to contest.
All right, Yaki almost dies immediately there by getting halted. He's able to stay alive, but has to deflect as he drops down. Troy's a little low, still gets hit by the accretion despite trying to use Smurf Shield to get out of the way, but that's the dash through from Rascal, and Twilight has the extra damage for Gargoyle. Gangnam Jin is not going to be able to stall out. Rascal trained on him. Laser focus! What is this?
Ooh.
Why are we even spending weeks speculating about San Francisco's Genji when Rascal comes out and gets 14 out of 21 final blows for San Francisco in one half?
Yeah, he was quite good. I think maybe he got a little bit of a wake up after getting picked off early with the halted accretion. Just kind of set him off a little bit. Out to pop off there, where you thought potentially he was going to come in, play some Mei and some Genji, but he plays Genji the entire time and crushes.
Rascal is... Okay, you know how we talk about sort of 10 final blows per 10 minutes is like a really strong example, right, of a good DPS, like really more than serviceable. Rascal has 16, 17 final blows per 10 right now. Now, that's an extrapolation because it's not been 10 minutes of game time yet, but that should give you an example of just how much higher than the average sort of output for final blows of DPS he is putting. Let's see if he can maintain that now, because he just might not get to play the Genji as much. Maybe there's a switch here.
Yeah, trying to maintain that and be as effective, dealing with the Yaki and BQB. I don't know if you're going to be able to keep up that same level of production against those two damage dealers, but be pretty impressive. Don't believe we saw no ticks come through for the Florida Mayhem on point B, so have to see them get a point A hold to get a victory, maybe a draw in play potentially.
Okay, so big switch up here for San Francisco. They go for a Xayah with the Winston. There won't be a Brig to deal with.
Now this is way more effective than like the Sombra Tracer compositions. Just because Genji's just way better right now than Tracer is.
It's another viable nano boost target as well, Matthew. Like, you don't just have to nano the Winston anymore. You get like Nano Blade against this composition is kind of gross.
Nano Blade's a win condition, and then EMP is a win condition as well. So you have
let's not forget
two
Graviton
combos.
Surge.
Yeah.
It's a win con as well. Or a way of shutting down a Genji or kind of anyone really. So San Francisco looks good on paper. Couple loose ends on the execution side to tie up, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is why the composition, though, is so good if you can get rolling, because you have those win conditions in terms of big ultimates that some of them don't even need to be comboed, like an EMP or a Graph, right? You can just use them on their own. Rally. Ooh, Striker. It's close to BQB there. Almost gets taken out.
All right, Chocoban. Talking Grand Finals MVP right here. Brawl Star.
They're waiting for a Striker to get in position here to get a hack.
All right, Nano on the Smurf, and he gets in, and well, there was a front line for the Florida Mayhem. It only existed for a brief blip in time, but it was there. Fleeting. Smurf now is going to jump back in once he's been topped up and deal with the stragglers. There is an Ashe on the point. Byram and Gangnam Jin are fairly safe here, so Florida can actually sally forth from that high ground position with the two healers if they're not dealt with, and that's a good start.
It's Rascal as well. Now you're going to get some players back. You're going to get at least one tick here.
Ow. Smurf,
for the shock, you'll get at least one tick. Troy comes back on the Wrecking Ball, shows you how much they want to win this. This will be a Transcendence from Byram to get on the point.
Okay, so Transcendence drawn out there. Byram had to use it. I think he was really worried about Luke getting C90 because of a pile driver or something similar. But BQB, look at this man. Dealing with like 2 bullets in the chamber, by the way, so he's like reloading every shot, but he needs to put damage out. He goes down to Rascal eventually. Yaki sees the break. He's like, I'm not going up there. There's no way. I don't have a pulse bomb yet. So as long as I keep them off the point, that's enough for now.
Still hunting, though. As Rascal gets an armor pack, they get back to the point here for the Shock.
Florida have to watch out.
They're going to bait them in, try to EMP potentially if they all start to come towards the point.
And they possibly will. They're probably going to play around the Orisa here. There's not many safe places to be right now for Florida. So an EMP
barely gets on.
devastating. There it is. 4 players caught by that one. That's probably all you're really going to need. Gargoyle steps up. Bob was hacked twice, so never really fired a shot. And even though it was a nice little bit of dynamite here, the Immortality Field has to be used for the Mayhem to even step foot on the point, and it won't work out. Now the Shock, 4 minutes for 1 tick, and they have a Blade. Nano Boost there as well with Primal Raid. This is a snowball.
This is going to get ugly. Nano Blade, Primal, Rally, Minefield. The Shock should be able to just do it here. They shouldn't need a ton of time.
Twilight hits that shot, and BQB is like 5 health. All it would have taken. So Nano Boost here, Twilight. Okay, looks like Rascal. He's trying to keep Rascal in his line of sight. So a different Nano Boost
I gotta let him get some armor.
Here we go. Dragon Blade, the Cyber Ninja strikes, and Rascal's found the third. Oh! Yep. He finds the hurty spot. And the San Francisco Shock now with just 1 tick required to win the map. They're going to do so with apter confidence. Rascal, 19 final blows, almost a deadlift out of a possible 39. So almost.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to pick a map that the other team is undefeated on. In this, I think it is quite difficult because I do agree. I think with the Florida Mayhem's kind of logic is like, well, Hanamura is like very Genji centric. Like you have Yaki, they have you don't really know. I mean, is it Tayo? Is it Rascal? Is it Super? Who is it? We saw Striker play some Genji earlier. They come in with Rascal and he shows up in a big way. Really kind of spoils anything that Florida would have had planned.
I mean, Rascal has 19 final blows. Florida has 20 as a team. So that is just how much one individual was able to skew a result heavily in his team's favor. Now, and again, this is a first to 3, right? We're not in the final yet, so there aren't that many more maps. With Rascal at the 4, excuse me, I'm getting choked up by how beautiful that was. Let's go to a break. We'll come back. Next map could be the last one. Florida need to hang in there.
The Overwatch League is brought to you by T-Mobile. Switch today and rank up to America's largest 5G network, T-Mobile. And by State Farm. For auto, home, or renters insurance, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. What a map we just saw. Hanamura was pretty darn one-sided thanks to the antics of one impish rascal on the Genji. Looked very, very good. One of those standout performances you just don't get every day. San Francisco are happy for it. So happy for it, in fact, Matt. They've put him back on the bench to rest.
Yeah, so
in the showers, bro.
Say you'll have Rascal come out. It'll be Ansu comes back in, and the Florida Mayhem's map choice here is Havana. With the map choice here, you're going to see, obviously, lots of double shield, I think, on Havana. Like, really long sightlines, so the dive versions, maybe in the warehouse, not as easy to run. I think this has really put a lot of emphasis on the BQB versus Ons matchup.
Yeah, I think we might. I mean, I don't know how brave these two teams are. The reason Paris Eternal played Widowmaker for the entire map is because Xe is just unbelievable. I mean, he's a front runner in the MVP race, so no surprise there. But playing Widowmaker in the second part of Havana is kind of hard. There are that many angles, and it's kind of dangerous to play that way, especially when it's easy for, you know, Genji's Tracers and the like to access you. So maybe we see Ash, the more standard setup of play. You know, Johnny at halftime felt that the double shield, like the standard double shield, looked better for San Francisco. Sorry, for Florida. And especially even now when we see Arns get subbed in and think we maybe don't expect as much Genji without Rascal.
Yeah, and I will say for Florida Mayhem, like, I think you've been pretty happy with how BQB is done in that head-to-head in terms of the hit scan. So to take it to a map like Havana, I'm not entirely surprised with.
Off to Havana we go in moments, and the Florida Mayhem, I mean, before they realize it, Matt, they could be out of this entire tournament. The Countdown Cup could be over for them. They need a map win.
A lot like the way I felt about the Valiant series the other day. Like, if they can just get a Game 5, you feel pretty decent about it. Their chances in that control to get, I mean, they dominated map number 1.
Right, that wasn't close control.
It's just can they get another map win to force control yet again? Obviously, it would have to happen here. Widowmaker showing for the Florida Mayhem. BQB and potentially the Shock doing the same.
We'll see if San Francisco do try to strike a Sombra. Maybe not a huge surprise to see this from Florida Mayhem. See the Zen Batiste combo.
It might be just to check the Sombra from Striker, then decide what they want to play. Maybe you want to play Tracer and put pressure on the backline.
I mean, again, your backline pressure just... Yeah, I don't know how good it feels for San Francisco if they just go the Widow Tracer here.
Like we talked about yesterday, again, the Valiant game, like playing the Tracer versus like versus Genji in terms of like how you would fit them into this composition, it's so much harder to play the Tracer correctly and get a lot of value than Genji.
Especially Pulse Bomb is so easily shut down now. Alright, so it is Widow Sombra here. So Arnt's playing a safe angle right now. This is a fairly standard peak. I mean, yeah, would have loved to have seen that if you're a Shock fan, but Arnt's now has a decent idea of where BQB is playing.
Oh,
what?
That looked like it was. He had to jump over. That was a grapple shot, probably over the top of the shield.
Unless Gangnam Jin just peeked ahead of the shield for a brief moment. No, there's no way. Arts has found another one. BQB is down now. Widow and Batiste are both missing. And so the Florida Mayhem, they themselves just have to give all this space up. And Arns will happily move in now.
They still know that Yaki's over to the side, I believe, though.
They have to do something about this Widow position. They need to dig Arns out, otherwise they're just going to get ruined as they try and walk out. There's no safety for Gangnam Jim and Byram playing this way. BQB has a really, small angle to work with as well. Oh, no! Yaki tries to go for Arns, but he wasn't deflecting, and the headshot was found. Violet just picks up BQB. Violet, by the way, who's been a sniper in and of, in his own right so far over this series.
Mayhem battling back, though.
Yeah, I mean, look, they actually managed to group everyone up pretty well. Despite Yaki going down on that high ground, they still have the bulk of their forces here, and the healing was good. Violet's able to pick Gargoyle up, though, as he's held aloft in the sentence that was thrown in. This is so aggressive from him. Who's there to capitalize? Choyoban, I guess, steps up and says, all right, okay.
I mean, you're keeping Choi alive, and you have a Smurf coming off the spawn, but Yaki gets 2 with a blade. But the cart goes through, Mitch, as the Shock are able to get, I believe, Smurf on the cart. A bunch of people spread out, and it was so close to getting on through that they're able to get the first point. That is heartbreaking for Florida. It looked like they were going to bounce back and at least be able to get a hold there for a little bit.
Or maybe not just a little bit. We saw, I mean, Violet's Transcendence was,
Let's take a look at this. Yeah, so Smurf is just like on the cart passively. Like, it's honestly in that type of position, with the way that Smurf is like looking there and shooting, he may not even be aware that he's pushing the cart in.
Well, he got bypassed. Yeah, I think there was also an immortality field by Gangnam Jin thrown down, and everyone from Florida was like, "Oh, we need to stand under this so we can sort of play more aggressively." And they left the cart. Oh no! That was one of their best opportunities after a bit of a frivolous transcendence from Violet there, but we'll never know now. We will never know. Carter stopped under the bridge. Smurf is just trying to nudge it forward bit by bit. Yaki will have to go down there and start to harass Smurf, who is very much on his own.
You'll be able to set up like a halt plus a, a halt plus a Gravitic Flux, so you probably don't need it now as you get a kill on a Violet and Smurf. So allows Yaki to build up towards Blade, Gangnam Jin to build up towards Amp Matrix here.
I like the translocator behind enemy lines here. This means that Striker just gets to return to Florida's backline a little faster.
It's a little too far though. Like he deploys another one here because if he's going to use EMP up on the bridge, you're going to need some of his damage. And oh, you may not even. What? Oh, okay.
That's ferocious from BQB.
Looking like the burrito maker.
Absolute nutter. Mid-air headshot there as he traverses through this room, and it's not just Exy that's got some moves on this part of the map. Yaki's close to a Dragon Blade now, and the Mayhem are actually about to hit Easy Street here. Roll double 6, and they bought Mayfair. Now let's see what they can do with these ultimates. EMP gets Gargle. Oh, their front line's gone, though. Nicely done by San Francisco.
Yeah, and the Mayhem invest their Blade there. They don't even get Transcendence out because, well, Violet doesn't have it. So that's a pretty tough loss. You have your front line get burnt down there. It's just Supercharger plus the EMP. They lose all the shielding. The halt comes through. Just too much damage to be able to survive. Now the Florida Mayhem, they can get on and contest here. They're going to have both support ults.
There is an Amp Matrix there for Twilight, so this is kind of tricky for the Mayhem. They have to push through like this. Smurf going to try and hide behind the cart here. Fate pushes down. The shield got blown up pretty quickly. Transcendence had to be used, but BQB's already gone. Choke over now. Doesn't go for the Gravitic Flux. What discipline to hold onto this now and know we can just push in and try and deal with Gargoyle. Immortality field nicely done by Gangnam Jin, but Choihoben doesn't care. Invest all your resources you want in killing him. The cart was still moving.
Yeah, and Byram's Transcendence comes in when a lot of the players from the Mayhem are already still like pretty healthy on the point. It was, and at that moment, the Shock can just back out. The Shock get a much better use out of their Transcendence when Gargoyle ends up using his Gravitic Flux. And he did mention that Choi holds on to this for the next fight. So having this Gravitic Flux first, no support ult, they're going to have to try and bait out the Immortality field here early, and then use Choi's Gravitic Flux.
Why can Striker do that? Nice headshot. Okay, so Supercharge gets used here. Choihoben goes for a Flux that catches the front line. Fake just floats out of it as he fortifies. And Yaki getting rid of Violet is quite big. Immortality field is used. Yaki can dash, and he does. Nicely done. That is very clean.
So Yaki with a dash through gets 2. He'll have a Blade for the next fight. The Yaki with a Blade, Gangnam Jin with an Amp Matrix coming up next. But this is the same combination they had the last time when Striker had EMP. Like, they played really aggressive with it because obviously you would want to play aggressive with the Amp Matrix Blade. But the EMP comes in and just negates any of its effects. So they have to be careful of when they're going to use this and not fall into Striker and the Shock's trap.
San Francisco do want to dare the Mayhem to come forward, right? They're going to sit on the card and just focus on moving it. They're actually not trying to take a lot of space outside of just staying on the card. Here's our Matrix. See the halt there? A lot of damage on Choihoben. And the front line again is hacked. Now Byram goes down with Transcendence, but that's the only kill. I mean, San Francisco can't finish off Beta Gargoyle, who was so low, and now the Mayhem get to crack back with a Flux and Blade of their own. Smurf is definitely done here, and San Francisco don't get what they were looking for at all from the Sombra. Striker switches over to Tracer here. Tracer Widow.
See, this is where you would love to have the option of having, like, Striker play Genji, right? Like the Genji would be way more effective here, you know, comboing with the halts, etc. Walls from both Widows. Just to kind of counter each other. Ons with really no sightlines here whatsoever.
Gargoyle, yeah, the information that Gargoyle had because of his team's infra was actually what caused him to be split from his team. He didn't want to push out into line of sight, and then the rest of the Mayhem backed up and left him on his own. He actually got hurt by his own team's infra.
And he gets so low, he's not able to cross the bridge, get back. It results in 2 other players dropping as well.
All right, Byram has to transcend it there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all
He
over
has
if he goes
to.
down. But there's zero value for this transcendence for Florida right now. So that is heartbreaking just to have him caught out. So really, I guess, bad out positioning here for the Florida Mayhem in the last couple of moments has hurt them. Troy Coben's going to have a hefty amount of shielding, and Arns is sitting pretty here in the background. Has the sideline that he needs. Yaki can't get to him because Striker just ripped into pieces. And this card in overtime now is looking to get home.
So they did get it into OT, the Florida Mayhem. Although it looked like the Shock were putting together a pretty good time early, you know, with Smurf kind of like backhapping the cart. Florida's defense pretty good inside of the warehouse, and then they're able to withstand a good surge of ultimates, right? Like the EMP, they're able to withstand that fight. That was like the big one where then Striker has to change after. The Shock still muscle it over the line in the end, but no time in the time bank. So not a bad defense here for the Florida Mayhem.
San Francisco now want to be able to get rolling on one of these points. I sort of checkpoint A if they can actually get their Widow online, if Arns can actually keep Florida quiet. Any situation in which San Francisco can force a switch, you know, any situation where BKB is forced to either play more passive angles or, God forbid, he switches. I don't think that happens here. But San Francisco don't have the Genji option to work with. So I think you may agree with this, Matt. It seems like the Genji is much more robust, even on defense here.
Yeah, it's just the amount of damage you're able to do in such a short burst with Genji, like the ability for Blade to be a game-winning ultimate as much as like an EMP would be. I think the difference is between like Sombra and Genji is all that Genji kind of provides in terms of damage elsewhere. Sombra doesn't really provide that.
Am I crazy for feeling like Supercharger just feels kind of cruddy for San Francisco based on their DPS selections?
It's not great, but I will say you have Violet and Twilight, 2 support players who put down, you know, comparable damage to a lot of DPS players.
Well, they're going to have to really be front-loading some deeps here. Twilight very low. No deeps from the graveyard, apparently.
Nope.
BKB, I bet you BKB doesn't know who he just hit then. I bet he has no idea where that deep came from. But he doesn't care. He'll take them anyway. The Violet going down so early. The card's on the move, and San Francisco already forced into a corner here. Troy very low, and Smurf is probably going to fall here.
Yeah. And when you lose your Baptiste, you don't have a lot of the AoE healing, right? Just Violet with the Harmony Orbs. It's very difficult to keep the tanks up through all of that damage. You lose Smurf, so that's your main shield here. He's going to come back on Wrecking Ball, try and get back in the fight.
No one can get BKB out of this position except Arns getting a headshot. San Francisco don't have the mobility outside of Smurf to really get there. BKB drops down voluntarily here, and Smurf eventually gets picked up. Card is just being contested now. Joy, it has to be a Transcendence now for Violet to keep them there. Does Twilight step forward into the healing? He does, but I mean, there's a shield in the way, and kind of hard to break through it, yet they managed to do so. Fate's shield goes down. He eventually is mowed over, but San Francisco are not able to stop the Mayhem in their tracks.
I mean, you still have Smurf here just going around on the ball. He'll fall eventually, but that was better than I expected considering how that started. For the Shock, like they were able to draw a little bit of time out from the Mayhem, but the Mayhem will come in now, Mitch. No, Violet, look at this. After using the Transcendence, you won't have it for this Blade that'll come through. So Yaki will be able to use that for pretty much free. And the walls will give him a good idea where everybody's hiding out.
Fate takes a huge amount of damage from Violet's orbs there, helps him build up another Transcendence. He's already a third of the way there. It's a dangerous Widow flank, to be sure. Immortality Field has to be used. That is now gone for Gangnam Jin. And Fate drops. Joy now starting to turn up the heat a little bit more. Someone on Twitter asked me to give Choi a bit more credit. We give Sigma's MVP every map, every game. Me and Matt do, so don't worry, he's getting his love.
He's also up for the T-Mobile MVP.
That's right, and he was also Grand Finals MVP last year. The only reason I think he wasn't in the MVP winning bracket is because he really only started to come alive towards the end. And Nance, well,
the Widows on defense on this point of the map over the last like 2 days have just been on fire. Like just the angles you can take, peeking out the spawn, and like that's a pretty safe angle, right? Nobody can really capitalize on that. He can use a grapple to get back up here to the bridge with the rest of the team. The Widows have been dominant here in the warehouse, which is something you really wouldn't see in the past.
It was a different playstyle, right? You're playing more of a flanker, right? And you really don't have the time to stand in one spot. You have to continually change your position, try and get around these shields, of which there are 2 big ones.
BQB goes away from the Widow here, so he'll play Ashe.
That's what I mentioned. I mean, if BQB's forced to sort of switch off, that's a very good sign for San Francisco. However, this part of the map plays more, I think, to Ashe's effective range than Widow's. It's not super long range, and you get more value, maybe, out of the Dynamite. See if that's true. Art's very low. Big Gravitic Flux here. Violet. Oh, he was outside the Immortality field. He is lucky to be alive.
Him and Ans are real low.
Now, here's the Transcendence, though. That's huge for San Francisco. The Violet can stay alive through that. This forces the Saint out from the Mayhem right now. Byram goes for his ultimate. The supercharge is down. Notice that Smurf and Choikobin, they play forward again. They knew the EMP was coming, so they get aggressive once more. And Gargoyle and BQB are gone. Violet is wrapped all the way around. Needs to watch for respawns, but
a lot of players still here for the Mayhem.
Okay, that Gravitic Flux forces out an Immortality field now, and there's a blade here for Yaki. First, Twilight's Immortality field is gone. Yaki gets a lot there, but Violet playing in that weird flanking position actually gets the trade kill.
It's definitely winnable, though, for the Florida Mayhem. Like, you have enough players coming off now of the respawn after 2 kills. With that blade is, Ans with a headshot, though, on the Byram. The cart, though, still moving.
Okay, but if Byram doesn't die there, Ans probably does, because he had an Immortality field and he was smanging orbs across the map. But now Ans gets to sit here, play a little bit safer. Bob thrown in the corner. Great positioning there from BQB. Ans had nowhere to go. He'd already used his grappling hook, and then he just got mowed down by the bodyguard. Choi's in trouble as well. Just behind the shield for the time being. Is there an Immortality field available? No, not with Twilight going down. It has to be a Transcendence here, and somehow that's enough. San Francisco again come alive. Again, Choikobin finds a massive accretion kill to turn the fight around.
Florida has lost some heartbreaking fights. I mean, they're starting to turn that one around. Like you mentioned, it was a beautiful Bob placement from BQB, but almost even better timing with Fate using a halt to keep him in line, keep Ans in line of that Bob. Ans will go back to Widow now. They're going over to Tracer just to try and make it back. A minute to go on the clock, Mitch. They're going to be walking right into EMP Supercharger. That is a brutal combination to be walking directly into.
I mean, there's a lot there for San Francisco. Gravitic Flux also just around the corner. And the Mayhem have good support ultimates, though. This Transcendence, a lot of this comes down to when this EMP happens. And if Byram can avoid it and get a Transcendence. See, Byram wants to play in that doorway, playing safe and well. He goes down! Oh no! Striker got the EMP on him and he just disintegrated. So without the Zenyatta, it's got to be a quick reset. Quick reset for Florida.
20 seconds, you'll have a chance maybe here to touch.
It's got to be awkward either way, Matt. Yeah. You're not going to be at full strength. It's not going to be nominal conditions.
No, but if you can get there, you have Transcendence and a bullet.
Oh! Get out! 2 for Ans on the trot, and that is, I mean, that's it. That's a nail in the coffin there for the Florida Mayhem. I mean, he came from ranked, and now he's in the Overwatch League making waves on Widow. Byram's able to find Ans here, but it's a supercharger on the high ground, and Fate is so low. Gravitic Flux aimed at the Mayhem. Can they touch? Gargoyle just too far away. Tantalizingly close to at least keeping his team alive. But the Florida Mayhem once more succumb to the inexorable force that is the San Francisco Shock. They booked themselves another berth in our grand final.
It's so impressive that like throughout the Countdown Cup and the last few weeks, all of the talk has been like, oh, well, maybe the Shock can't play the optimal composition, this and that, whatnot. They're still able to beat teams even when they don't have to. I think they're at a point where they know what they do works, and like if they have certain players on certain heroes, that they're good enough to build around that to beat some of these more optimal or a little bit high-powered compositions. And Ans on the Widow there towards the end, you know, you go to switch to a Wrecking Ball, Lucio to try and get back towards the point to get a touch. He just comes out the left-hand side, slams the door on anything that Florida could have potentially had going there. You know, the double headshot, back-to-back, BQB, and Gangnam Jin gone. And that really seals it for the Shock.
We kind of teased it a little bit. I said, I think a good barometer for how the Mayhem is feeling is whether they can keep BQB on that Widowmaker, right? If he's forced to move off. And look, and maybe he wasn't forced, right? Maybe that's a strategic decision, but Ans's 18 final blows, BQB only ends the map with about 7. So definitely sort of outworked when it came to the hit scan roll.
This series was close, though. A lot like what we talked about yesterday with the Valiant in terms of their series with the Paris Eternal. Like, that series was close. Like, the Valiant had opportunities to be able to win. I think Florida Mayhem, they'll go back and look at this footage and see the exact holes and moments where it kind of fell apart.
Well, there's every possibility, Matt, that we go into halftime and it's 2-0 in favor of the Florida Mayhem. I mean, that was definitely on the cards. Incredible performance from the San Francisco Shock, although you have to wonder if they can get away with maybe not playing the optimal compositions as they go up against you know, the winner of Paris Eternal and Philadelphia Fusion. Player of the match for this semi-final presented by Xfinity is Violet. Rascal looked incredible for one map, but Violet was in there for all of them. Alongside Twilight here, he provided some much-needed brick control, especially on Eichenwald as a double shield started to come back out, but his Zen looked incredible again.
I think Violet on the Zen is just unreal. Like, the amount of just damage, the healing, the clutch kills time and time again. He was able to get a big one onto Yaki on Eichenwald, which really allowed the Shock to be able to win that map. I think time and time again, Violet, Choi, you know, Twilight. I mean, all the players in the Shock have come up with big moments. I think Twilight and Violet, though, Violet in particular, is really the one who shined today.
Yeah, I mean, there's a world where you can say that Arns maybe earned himself sort of player of the match honors as well. Obviously, not spending the entire series. The Shock have tons of sick DPS players. It's never the concern.
Well, I was gonna say, like, when the Shock play the way they do, you know, a lot of the times we see like a Genji who gets like player of the match, whatnot, with like crazy amounts of final blows, Dragon Blade kills, etc. The Shock don't play that way, so they kind of play like way more of an overall team game than a lot of other teams play right now, where everybody needs to perform at a high level to be able to win. You can't just kind of combine like one or two ultimates like time and time again and kind of rinse and repeat and win fights. So I think when you kind of look at them for like player of the match, you can really make a case for just about anybody.
So do San Francisco need to play heading into the final? Do they need to play, you know, strictly Genji Ashe and all these maps, or can they get away with their own style?
No, so what's interesting is I think they can get away with their own style. What I would be interested in, what I wouldn't say worried about from the San Francisco point of view, is that Paris and Philly, who obviously they play next, they switch it up more than just about any other team. You know what Florida's going to run. Florida's going to run double shield. They're going to run Ashe or Widow and Genji. Philadelphia, they'll throw a bunch of different looks at you. They'll play Sombra Genji with the Winston. They'll play Widowmaker compositions with a Genji. They'll play the Ashe. They'll play some McCree. Like, they'll play a healthy mix of everything. So I think not knowing what exactly to expect could be something that hurts the Shock just a little bit. Coming into this match against Florida, you knew what Florida was going to run. We all knew what Florida was going to come in and run. So the Shock were able to game plan and use map picks accordingly to kind of dodge and circumvent some of the really tough map choices for them.
Yeah, maybe that gets a little bit harder now, and whether it's Philly or Paris, it's a different style that they're probably going to actually have to go up against, right? We know that Philly, you know, aren't always sort of trying to push Carpe on the Widowmaker, right? We've seen like Ivy come in with Carpe mixed in. Hisu also comes in. You know that Paris is, you know, if they can use Exi on Widowmaker, they probably will as much as possible. You know, they also have like a weird look on control maps where it's like Soon and Nico. Like, how do you game plan against that? There's, you know, the Benbest playing Reinhardt with the Sigma. You know, they're playing double shield, but more of that aggressive Reinhardt, you know, wants to come forward.
Yeah, in a way, it kind of benefits the Shock, but it also hurts them. Like, no, they're not going to play just kind of the standard composition the entire time, and you're going to have to play your composition perfectly or like try and attempt to match it in certain situations. But it does leave you vulnerable to. Now the other teams have said, hey, like Paris and Philly have said, hey, look, we know what the Shock wants to do. They don't really want to play a ton of Genji. We have all these different types of looks that could really give them problems. So whether we run like Sombra Genji against a Sombra and a Tracer, right? Like the Sombra Genji is a little bit more effective. Like you have the different ultimate combos, etc. Then the Shock really need to play perfectly, or they need to switch, which you don't know how they would approach that.
Right, yeah. Obviously, switching within maps is something for San Francisco that looks a little bit more dubious, right? Like, I don't know, Striker's Genji looked okay on Eichenwald, but definitely not the same magnitude of impact as Rascal, for example. But, you know, I mean, he just wasn't in the server at the time. You do have a couple specialists on San Francisco, so that not only, we talked about this before, it not only telegraphs what you're going to play, it can also hinder you from sort of making on-the-fly switches. But a lot of these teams, as evidenced by the tweet from Swingchip about how the Mayhem practice for the map, a lot of teams have very preset ideas of what they want to play coming in. San Francisco, you know that they can offer the Winston Zaire. If we see maps like Volskaya pop up, in the rotation, it's a great map for them. We saw it a couple times, and they managed to make it work. Super is still getting subbed in on tank. It's not like he's not playing tank at all anymore.
Play some Reinhardt and Rush compositions.
Yeah, absolutely, which is the kind of thing that Paris Eternal specifically like to do, right? People used to get really upset at Cloudy, and they still get upset at Cloudy for doing that in ranked, right? Like playing this aggressive Reinhardt who flanks and charges out of nowhere, gets really close. We see Lucio in those compositions to give the Reinhardt more ability to close the gap. So while we are not under, hero pools right now, there is maybe one certain way these teams want to play. A ton of variation, though, is still available there. Sombra, Widowmaker, the Genji's there. We can see different main tanks. We get 3 different main tanks played right now.
Right.
Do we see Brig, or is it Zen Batiste all the way? Do we see Lucio Moira, especially for those control maps or teams that want to close the gaps? So San Francisco need to be watching this next map very closely because there are 2 teams with very distinct styles that they have to prepare for.
If there's any team, though, that has some stuff that we have not seen yet that they've been practicing and working on, it probably would be the Shock. Being able to pull out some different types of compositions that teams haven't seen them run yet in live games. Maybe they've scrimmed them a bunch of times, that they're able to come out here in the finals against either Philly or Paris and really catch a team off guard.
Yeah, that's so if they have something, I mean, I'd be surprised they haven't used it yet, but San Francisco, in the replay or the rematch, I guess, of the main LA final, they come out on top, and they'll get to move in and have another shot at winning one of these monthly cups. Their opponents will be very hungry for them, though, but before we get there, we want to hear from Choi Hyobin with Custard.
Yes, Mitch, thank you very much. I am here with Choi Hyobin, and I to translate as well. So that was an incredibly hard and competitive match. Is this as hard as you were expecting it to be?
네, 안녕하세요. 오늘 경기 되게 힘들게 이겼는데요. 많이 힘들었나요?
좀 마이크 좀 끄세요. 오늘 메이엠이 좀 제냐타를 써가지고 탱커 입장에서는 좀 많이 아파가지고 좀 힘들었던 것 같습니다.
Alright, so Mayhem had a really good performance, especially their tank line. So it was really pretty much a hard game.
Yeah, no, very back and forth. I honestly thought it could have gone either way. So you're up against the winner of the next match. It's going to be between the Philadelphia Fusion and the Paris Eternal. Who do you think is going to win, and who do you want to win?
네, 다음 경기에 파리 이터널과 필라델피아 퓨전의 경기가 있어지는데요. 어떤 팀이 이길 것으로 생각하시나요?
파리랑 필라델피아 좀 둘 다 잘해가지고 누가 올라와도 좀 이상할 것 같진 않은데 개인적으로 좀 파리가 올라왔으면 좋겠어요. 이유는 뭔가 다 알 것 같긴 한데 다 예상할 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Okay. So to be honest, both Paris and the Philadelphia Fusion deserve to advance to the final. But I honestly think Paris would come up, and I'm pretty sure that you guys all know the reason why.
Yeah. Paris have been very, very good. Okay, so I'm actually curious, moving into the APAC region, we actually just recently saw the Shanghai Dragons clean sweep through the competition. What are his thoughts on the Shanghai Dragons?
네. 아시아 지역은 벌써 그 카운트다운컵이 끝났는데요. 상하이 드래곤즈가 아시아 지역에서 무실 세트 우승을 달성했습니다. 곧 있으면 플레이오프 시즌으로 넘어가게 되는데 상하이 드래곤즈를 그랜드 파이널에서 만날 가능성 또한 있는데 어떤 생각을 가지고 계신가요?
저희도 좀 상하이랑 붙고 싶어서 상하이를 만나기 위해서라도 좀 더 열심히 올라가야 될 것 같습니다.
Yeah, I really also think that our team also wants to meet Shanghai Dragons, so we will try harder.
I think that's the match everyone wants to see. So you've been nominated as an MVP candidate this year. What does this mean to you as a player?
네, 최우빈 선수가 이번 시즌 MVP 후보로 선정이 됐는데요. 소감 한 말씀 부탁드립니다.
올해 MVP 후보에 선정돼서 정말 영광이고 많이 투표해 주시면 감사하겠습니다.
I really appreciate to become nominated as a MVP, and it's really an honor for me as personally, and hope you guys to vote me.
Yeah, well, I had you as my MVP at the start of the season. I'm definitely going to vote for you. But is there anything you want to say to the fans to get them to vote for you?
네, 그 커스타는 최우빈 선수 뽑겠다고 하네요. 그러면 팬분들한테 한 말씀 부탁드립니다.
항상 응원해 주셔서 정말 감사하고 자리아도 더 잘해줄 테니 앞으로 잘 봐주시고 앞으로도 열심히 하겠습니다.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for cheering us, me and also the San Francisco Shock, and I'll get better with Zarya as well, and I'll do better. I'll try harder as well.
You're already great. Thank you very much for joining me with this interview.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Yeah. All right, stick around. We have the Paris Eternal coming up against the Philadelphia Fusion right after this break.